When I was a kid, I was very thin and I got made fun of for it. Kids get made fun of for things. That's what I got made fun of for, being very thin. And I remember one day, this girl I liked made fun of how skinny my arms were. And I'm pretty sure that afternoon, I went to the school's weight room and I started throwing around some weight. I didn't know what I was doing, but I kept showing up. And eventually I ran into this guy. He was a senior at the time, and he had already been lifting weights for 4 years. He was very clearly on steroids, which I didn't understand at the time. He was competing in bodybuilding competitions. And he came over one day and asked if I wanted to work out with him. And he started showing me what to do and how to lift weights. And he gave me muscle and fitness magazines. And very quickly, I became obsessed with bodybuilding, which wasn't a great thing for me to become obsessed with because I am a textbook ectomorph. I have very thin bone structure, I have small joints, and I do not put on muscle easily at all. But that's what happened. I began living my whole life around this obsession and this need to put on weight. And eventually, I did. When I look back at pictures of myself in college, I was actually probably a little bit overweight, but I couldn't see it. All I saw when I looked in the mirror was that skinny 14-year-old kid. Now, back then, the term body dysmorphia wasn't as widely known as it is now. I was clearly dealing with a degree of that. The thing is, none of it was good for me. I remember getting a blood test around that time. My triglycerides were through the roof. My blood pressure was through the roof. Cholesterol was through the roof. I had horrible digestive issues. And not only that, my mental health was awful. I would just stare at myself in the mirror and I would rip myself apart because I didn't look the way I wanted to look. Doing that day after day, year after year, it's just not healthy for anyone. And then a series of events happened that caused me to start changing my focus from bodybuilding to athletic training. It started with a mud run I had signed up with some roommates and my wife. And even though I had a lot of fun during it, I was absolutely pathetically slow. I came in, I think, second or third to last place. My wife and my roommates were already done and had been done for a long time. They dried off, had coffee and a snack, and were ready to go home by the time I crossed. I had started biking to work, and I could barely make it 5 miles on the bike to work. And I was still having those pretty poor numbers in my blood tests. And there were some other things that happened too. But I started signing up for more mud runs, obstacle course races, and gradually I started shifting my time in the gym away from bodybuilding focused workouts and more to training for these events. I learned about the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and I got their Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist certification, which is a certification a lot of athletic bodies require coaches to have to work with athletes. I also got the NSCA's personal training cert, the UESCA's running coach cert, currently working on their cycling coach certification. And over the years, I've just gotten very into the science behind training and the athletic coaching field. I started switching my training programs over to athletic focused training so that I could do better in all these sports and activities I was doing. I had also taken up hiking and kayaking, rock climbing, anything that got me out into nature and moving my body, I had become interested in. And eventually, I just fully stopped focusing on the bodybuilding thing. After I made that switch, I started noticing some other differences. My relationship with food improved. I stopped seeing food just as a means to put on mass. I started learning how to fuel properly. And I stopped eating, honestly, force feeding myself just to put on weight. My physical health improved. All those numbers that have been so high for years dropped into normal levels. And maybe most importantly, my mental health improved. I was no longer standing there in front of a mirror, ripping myself apart because I didn't look how I wanted to. I wasn't constantly flexing anymore and walking around doing this, trying to feel like I had put on some muscle mass, just something I obsessively did. And I was just happier. And it makes a lot of sense because I was spending all this time in nature. I was moving my body, and I had begun to focus on what my muscles could do and not solely how they move. That is the idea that I built Outdoor Muscle around. There are so many influencers and companies out there that are focused on the aesthetics, how you look. So I wanted to create with Outdoor Muscle a strength and conditioning resource for people who didn't want to fall into that same obsession I did when I was a kid about body image, and who are interested in what their bodies could do and not obsessed with how they look. And that's still my goal with Outdoor Muscle. So look, this isn't to bash bodybuilding. If that's what you're into, you want to look better, there's nothing against that. I just think people do need to be aware of the risk that comes along with focusing solely on aesthetics. I'm not the first person, and I won't be the last person who became obsessed with it to the point where it was unhealthy physically and mentally. Hold on, we're gonna pause and look at this morning over the river. Morning. Beautiful out today.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Perfect weather, river's flowing, can't complain. You too, have a good one.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't want to turn the camera on the guy I was just talking to, but he's got a prosthetic leg, older gentleman, and he's out here riding his bike. Good for him. Here we go. All right, so look, I'm not trying to knock bodybuilding. Like I said, I did it for 20 years. It got me into the gym. It got me building muscle. It was easy for me to get into endurance and adventure sports because I had built up that strength and muscularity for years. There's a lot of positives to it. I just wanted to create something for those who didn't want to focus on that. And you know the ironic thing about all of it? When I finally broke the obsession I had and started changing my focus, I actually feel like I ended up looking better than I ever did. I got more compliments. Feel like people begin to view me more as an athlete because of how I looked and less of a meatball, which is essentially how I looked before. But the best thing about it is I didn't really care anymore how people thought I looked. It was nice to hear compliments, but I realized it no longer had the power over me that it once did because it was no longer the driving force of why I was working out. So if you're on the fence about doing endurance training, athletic training, training for some sort of adventure sport, it's worth at least trying and seeing how that likely improves your relationship with your body, with food, physical health. And if you want some help along the way, I have plenty of free resources available on my website and this YouTube channel. And I have coaching resources available too. I'll link in the description if that's something you're interested in. If you shared some of the same struggles I had, love to hear about it in the comments. If that's something you're comfortable sharing. If not, that's okay too. I hope if what I've discussed about focusing more on what your body's capable of, what your muscles are capable of, and less on how they look, resonated with some people out there. And if it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.